Hey everybody, thank you for tuning in. Today, of course, is January 6, 2025. This is the day that Congress will certify the electoral votes. It is also the anniversary of, 4 years back where what Democrats are affording Donald Trump right now is exactly the thing that Trump refused to afford Democrats when Joe Biden won this election. And so if you were looking for an instance where the asymmetry between the two parties is put on full display, it is this day right here, where, again, 4 years ago, a riotous mob stormed the U.S. Capitol, smearing shit on the walls and looking to assassinate Nancy Pelosi and hang the sitting Vice President, Mike Pence. And this time around, Democrats, I don't know whether or not there will be some objections. I presume... Look, I could say either way. It could go one way or the other. Maybe there might be some coordination among Democrats to just say, look, let's not do even a bare minimum of what Republicans did 4 years ago. But we may very well see some objections to the electoral vote certification. I presume that there won't be. In any case, before we see the even in the event that we do see some objections, and before we see Republicans or right-wing commentators say that there is some equivalency between the two sides, because just as Republicans objected 4 years ago, Democrats may object today, there is no equivalency between politicians objecting, as is their constitutional right, to the vote certification so that they can afford themselves or avail themselves of the process afforded to them, with storming the U.S. Capitol and looking to kill the Vice President and Speaker of the House because you're not happy that the loser of the election was not anointed the winner. So if you hear any right-wing commentators, any Republicans going on Fox News, I beg of you, disabuse yourself of this notion that the two parties are the same. And we're seeing that put on full display today by virtue of the fact that Joe Biden or Kamala Harris did not call for a mob to assemble at the Ellipse today so that they can go fight for their country and storm the U.S. Capitol looking to bash in the heads of police officers and impale them and bludgeon them with the blunt end of flagpoles. So no, there is no equivalency between what the two sides are doing right here. I should also note that in the 4 years that have passed since January 6, 2021, about 1,600 people have been charged in the insurrection crowd that stormed the Capitol on January 6th. And we should expect most of, if not all of those people to receive pardons from Donald Trump when he takes office. And I think, if anything, puts on full display the glaring, again, asymmetry and just joke of the Republican Party branding itself the party of law and order. It is that right there. It is these people looking to just heap rewards onto people who have broken the law, again, sought to kill police officers, bludgeon police officers, injure police officers, throw fire extinguishers at police officers, all because the God King summoned them to the U.S. Capitol. And those people will not face the fullest extent of the law, because so long as you show loyalty to Donald Trump, that is the sole qualification that he needs to be able to have some justification in his addled brain to offer some pardon or some clemency. So these are people who are going to be released from prison if they're in prison, who are going to have their charges wiped away if they have been charged, all because they offered Trump exactly what he wanted, which is loyalty at all costs. And it doesn't matter what they did to warrant those charges in the first place, so long as they were willing to show some fealty to the God King here. So that's where we're at right now. I know a big question among a lot of you watching right now is what the deal is with Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. Section 3 of the 14th Amendment says that if you've previously taken an oath of office and you have engaged in or given aid or comfort to those who've engaged in insurrection, that you are disqualified from taking the oath of office again. You are disqualified from holding federal office again. And so on its face, it is pretty damn clear that Donald Trump falls into that bucket of both engaging in and giving aid or comfort to those who've engaged in insurrection as a previous office holder, who would therefore be disqualified from taking office again. The reality is that there is a pretty vast gulf here between what should happen and what will happen. And I wish that I could sit here and tell you that because the plain text of the Constitution in black and white says that Donald Trump should not be allowed to take the oath of office, that that's what will happen today, on January 20th, or that would prevent this process today from moving forward. But I sadly can't tell you that. In the same way that I can't tell you that the Supreme Court has to adhere to the plain text of the Constitution in its rulings, I can't tell you that. There is, again, a pretty vast gulf here between what should happen and what will happen. What should happen is that it should be abundantly clear by virtue of Trump's actions on January 6, 2021, and in the immediate aftermath of January 6, 2021, and even preceding January 6, 2021, that he should be disqualified from taking the oath of office. What will happen is that he will be able to take the oath of office by virtue of the fact that, A, there is not enough support in the Democratic Party alone to prevent this from happening, and B, there is no shortage of cowardice in the Republican Party, even among people for whom it was abundantly clear 4 years ago today that Trump was disqualified. Those people have come around because they view their standing in the Republican Party, in Donald Trump's Republican Party, as being more important than any adherence to the U.S. Constitution. And I've said this before in my videos, and I'll say it again right now, but our laws and our adherence to the Constitution is only as strong as everybody's collective willingness to uphold it. And right now, there is only about 50% buy-in to the ideals of the Constitution and to our laws right now from members of our government. And they're only the people on the left. And the right has decided collectively, because they view Donald Trump as their vehicle for power, that what they're going to do is disregard the plain text of the Constitution in deference to Donald Trump. And I know people watching this right now are upset to hear me say that, and I'm upset to be the one saying it. I'm going to be a pragmatist here. Look, I can say this from two perspectives. From an idealistic perspective, I can say there is not a shadow of a doubt that Donald Trump is disqualified from taking the oath of office, based on the plain text of the Constitution, based on Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, based on the fact that he clearly gave aid or comfort to those who incited an insurrection on January 6th, if we don't just go ahead and make the argument that he himself engaged in insurrection on January 26th. But from a pragmatic perspective, I also have to acknowledge right now that there is no appetite among this Republican Party to deprive him of the ability to take the oath of office. And so, again, I wish I had better news here to report. I wish there was something that I could say that could restore some faith in the processes of our government right now. But it doesn't look like there is the appetite among the people who have the ability to take that stand and actually usher in, to do what's right. And look, even if Democratic elected officials tried to do it, it would be challenged in court and would go up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court is a wholly owned subsidiary of Donald Trump, and we've already seen the ways in which they will be deferential to him as it relates to this very issue. Remember, Trump was an adjudicated insurrectionist in a California court. I believe the judge was Judge Wallace. He was also an adjudicated insurrectionist in Colorado in a trial court. That was upheld at the Colorado Supreme Court. That was appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court. The U.S. Supreme Court overturned the ruling of the Colorado Supreme Court and basically said that Donald Trump wouldn't be able to have his name kept off the primary ballot in Colorado. Now, there is a world in which I do agree somewhat with their ruling, in that Section 3 of the 14th Amendment doesn't say that your name can't be on the primary ballot. It says that you can't take an oath of office. Of course, the understood interpretation of that is if they're not going to keep him off the primary ballot, then they're also not going to do what they needed to do to keep him off, to prevent him from taking the oath of office in the first place. I think that was the understood interpretation of their ruling. And so, but what it says more broadly is that even if this was challenged, there is not the support among the final arbiters of the U.S. Constitution, which is the Supreme Court justices. And without that, there isn't anything that Democrats would be able to do to prevent Donald Trump from taking the oath of office. And so that's the situation that we're in right now. And I know that there are going to be people who say, look, you just got to keep fighting until the very last second. But I also think it's important to some degree to recognize, to know where to spend our political capital, and to be pragmatic in the sense that we can all see that he's not going to face any obstacle in terms of taking the oath of office. And so where is our energy best spent? Is it best spent trying to prevent something that is clearly going to happen from happening, or is it best spent trying to figure out which hills to die on, which battles to pick, and where we can actually win? And I would say, look, and this is coming from me, somebody who has literally dedicated his entire life to fighting against Trump and Trumpism and to promoting the ideals of the Democratic Party, progressive ideals more broadly. I do think that the latter it is probably going to serve us better in terms of, knowing where to pick our battles and knowing which hills to die on. I think that that's going to serve us better moving forward. And so that's what I'm going to be focusing on right now and as we head into the next 4 years here. And I'm getting a question right now, if I may ask, how do you carry on? I'm tired, so tired, 4 more years. And I get it. And I think that we can do 2 things. One is to know when to check out, and not everybody, like, I'm an exception because my job requires me to have to stare at Twitter and watch this stuff on a daily basis, but I'm assuming for the rest of you who don't do political analysis on YouTube for a living, know when it's okay to check out and when to put the phone down and when to put Twitter down. That's okay to take breaks. This is going to be a marathon here, and so we're not obligated to treat it like a sprint. And the second thing is I had alluded to this just a few minutes ago, but to know where to pick our battles. And I know that in the first Trump term, everything was a 5-alarm fire, and I don't think there is the appetite among Americans more broadly, because there is a sense of fatigue and exhaustion amid the whole Trumpism of it all. And I'm in that same boat, and I completely understand and I sympathize. And I think that the onus is going to be on us here to recognize where we should expend our political capital, so to speak, our attention, and which stuff isn't worth focusing on. And there are going to be some big fights, and there are going to be some very medium and small fights. And I think the same things that would have gotten attention in the first Trump administration, because all of the chaos was brand new, I don't think that's going to garner the same attention the second time around. And so I think it's going to be incumbent on us to figure out which stuff to focus our attention on and which stuff to not focus all of our attention on. And that'll help us, by the way, because just from a messaging perspective, which is what I focus on, I think it's going to be important for us to know how to kind of overcome this Steve Bannon model of flooding the zone with shit. And Republicans rely on basically making sure that Democrats are looking in 10 different directions by screwing with healthcare and abortion rights and immigration and and gun safety and Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid knowing full well that Democrats will look in 10 different directions, will be split in 10 different directions. And when our attention is everywhere, it's kind of nowhere all at once. And so Republicans rely on that, and they really derive some benefit from that. At the same time, I know that you all have seen the ways in which Republican messaging is so effective because they are coordinated in their messaging. And so while Democrats are sitting here arguing virtuously, I might add, about healthcare and abortion rights and climate change and gun safety and earned benefits and on and on and on, Republicans are focused on, Hunter Biden or Hunter Biden's laptop, as was the case for months and months and months, or trans inmates getting gender reassignment surgeries in prison, as is the case for months and months and months. And so they're very good at focusing their messaging while Democrats are scattered in 10 different directions. And so I think this is a good lesson for us to not only be more effective against Trump, but also just be more effective at messaging more broadly and being able to focus our messaging and push out the distractions that are coming at us from 10 different directions and maybe focus on just the most important one or two things. And I think that, yes, that will leave some things by the wayside, but if it's in service of our broader goal, which is to make sure that we consolidate attention and that we don't get too scattered, I think ultimately this is going to be a good lesson for those of us on the left to learn who have, for my entire life been plagued with not really knowing how to coordinate our messaging because of the way that mainstream media generally takes their cues from the right, and we're so often left on defense instead of being on offense. And there have been some instances in the recent past where Democrats have been on offense, and Republicans don't know how to push back against that. And so knowing full well that they don't have good pushback when Democrats are on the offense, our goal here should be to be on offense as much as humanly possible. I'm getting a lot of questions in the chat. I'm going to do my best to try and answer them. So let's see. For those asking if it was certified, not yet. We are about 10 minutes away from this process beginning in earnest, and that's going to start at about 1 p.m. Eastern. Okay, what we can do is you can throw some questions in the chat and I will do my best to get to them and answer them in the little bit of time that we have before this process actually begins. After Fisher's husband refused to shake Vice President Harris's hand, this is I don't know if you've seen the video of this happening. Let me see if I can pull this up right now.
Congratulations. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for your work. And thank you. Congratulations to you.
Thank you.
Look at that. Outright refuses to shake Kamala Harris's hand.
That way just a little bit. There you go.
Thank you. Congratulations. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for your work. And thank you. Congratulations to you.
Thank you.
Congratulations to you.
Thank you.
That is the degree of class that we're dealing with here. And so, Pondering Politics, highly recommend you subscribe to the channel. We must encourage Democrats in office and the media to reciprocate some of the disrespect and incivility the GOP always gives. Shouldn't call Trump president or Vance vice president. And I don't know that I've ever called him President Trump in the 5 years that I've been doing this, but I do think the broader point is a good one, and that is that there does need to be some acknowledgement of the disrespect that Democrats get from the right, but B, a willingness for Democrats to actually reciprocate and not constantly do the whole when they go low, we go high adage, and to finally recognize that politics is not some. I've said this before, but like, what we should be doing in politics right now is not to. We're not here looking for some spiritual leaders. We're not here looking for a partner or a spouse. What we are doing is just finding people on our side who can fight to get elected, to help the people who we're looking to help, and that's it. And there's this mentality on the left that we have to act in a way that's like the way that we would expect our spiritual leaders to act, or our husbands or wives to act, like life partners to act. And you always have to be peak civility, and you always have to be perfectly deferential to institutions and norms. And what Democrats are taking so long to recognize is that we are just in a fight right now to get elected, to help people that we're looking to help, and that's it. And to not put norms above recognizing the importance of winning, getting Republicans out of office, and trying to enact some of the agenda that we're looking to enact. And I think the faster that we can learn that, the better off we'll be, because the asymmetry at play between the two sides right now. I mean, I know that you've heard like this is cliche at this point, but Democrats are bringing a knife or not even to a gunfight, and so long as we continue to do that, we'll continue to lose. And I do think that it would benefit us to recognize that this is a fight, that Republicans are willing to do whatever it takes to win, and that so long as Democrats don't recognize that, we'll continue to lose out to the party that does want to win at all costs. Will Democrats be able to give messaging speeches as they certify each state? If so, should Colorado representatives address Trump being ruled an insurrectionist? I think that maybe they can object. Oh, no, I know that they can object. I think the threshold is that they need 9 members of. Let me just confirm. It used to be that you need 1 member of the House and 1 member of the Senate. Okay, I'm getting the note, and I think this is correct. 1/5 of the Senate and the House. I think that is correct. I should note that never in history has an objection been sustained. So never has the House been able to, or the House and Senate, well, Congress been able to block certification of any specific state. I don't anticipate that will be the case here. I know that they will probably have the opportunity to speak if they do issue an objection. I think they might also have the opportunity to speak, and then they can request other members to reach that threshold so that they can get 1/5 of the House and Senate. And they might not get that, but they might still have that opportunity to use as a platform to air their grievances. So we may very well see that, and we'll know in just a few minutes here. Okay, here's an interesting comment that I'm getting. We need to address the elephant in the room. The majority of voters elected a fascist knowing that he was a fascist. He was preferable twice to a highly qualified woman. I think two things. I think yes and no. I think it's clear that enough people in Trump's base who were informed voters knew full well what they were doing, knew full well who he was. And yes, I think there is a huge amount of misogyny and racism in this country. I don't think anybody could doubt that, especially seeing the fact that you have somebody who is eminently qualified in Hillary Clinton, eminently qualified in Kamala Harris, losing to someone who is so aggressively unqualified, literally and metaphorically, as Donald Trump. The other part of that, though, that I think is worth noting is that a lot of people in this country who voted in this election aren't high information voters. And a lot of them were responding directly to the financial challenges, the economic challenges in the environment that we're living in. And so this was a high inflation environment. And a lot of people don't know what's going on in politics, don't pay attention to politics, don't spend a single day of their lives watching Kamala Harris or Donald Trump or watching the commercials or anything like that. They just see that prices went up in the grocery store, things are harder to afford than they were before, and so this is a punishment election and they're just looking to punish the person in charge. And that was the case not just in the United States, but across the entire planet. As far as I know, I think Mexico was able to preserve their incumbent party, but every other industrialized country in the world saw the governing party lose their majority outright or lose seats in their majority. And there was a worldwide backlash to incumbents in the world as the result of high inflation stemming from COVID, and people were looking to punish their leaders across the entire globe, and the US wasn't immune to that. And so I know that there are a lot of issues with both our electorate and with the Democratic Party more broadly, and I think that this is a good moment to have some introspection and figure out where Democrats can get stronger. But at the same time, I want to caution against throwing the whole thing away, because I do think that I don't want to overstate the importance of this being about Trump or Kamala, when in large part this was just the result of, for a lot of people out there who were voting, them seeing that prices were high and them looking to punish the people in charge. And unfortunately for us, the people in charge were the Democrats. And so there is some degree, I think, of that is at play here, which is, by the way, not in the slightest to excuse what we've seen from a lot of these voters, excusing what Trump has done or rejecting somebody like Kamala Harris, especially because she's a woman or because she's black. But so I don't want to excuse those people, because they know full well who Donald Trump was when they voted for him. They knew what he did. They knew what happened on January 6th. They knew the ways in which he lied coming into office his first term on promises that he would usher in some manufacturing renaissance and job renaissance, and bring in an infrastructure law and a healthcare plan that was cheaper and more affordable. He didn't do any of that. All he did was pass a tax cut for millionaires and billionaires. This guy is a liar through and through, and he did it on the backs of working class people who he didn't lift a finger for once he was actually in office. So there is, as far as I'm concerned, no excuse to pay him an ounce of deference, or certainly not to vote for the guy. But I do want to just, again, note that for a lot of people who voted, they don't know that, because people don't pay attention to politics.
The House come to order.
The way that I wish they would. And so for a lot of people, it was an instance where they were just looking to punish the people in charge. So I think it's a mix of both of those things.
Vice President and the United States Senate.
One quick note, if you are watching this right now and you want to support my work and these live streams, please make sure to either follow or subscribe to my channel. That's the best way to support me and these live streams. I'll never put my content behind a paywall. So simply following or subscribing is the best way to support me and my work, and I really appreciate it. Okay, so here is the electoral certification. We'll see if there are any objections or what happens today, but I'll leave it over to Congress now. while we're waiting for some movement here, I will answer a question that I was just posed. With the destruction of the economy in the next 2 years, how well do you think the Democrats will do in midterms? Do you think we need more simple messaging? I think two things. One, I don't want to say that the economy is going to be destroyed in the next 2 years without seeing it. I think if Trump is successful in passing his tariffs, then we will probably see negative economic consequences from that, impacts from that. But what I want to do is to make sure that we are not preordaining things that haven't happened yet, and to kind of retain our credibility that way. Do I think that if Trump is successful with his tariffs, that will hurt the economy? Absolutely. Do I think that prices will go up on everything? Absolutely. But I would keep our powder dry for a moment until and unless that actually happens. With that said, the second part of the question, do we need more simple messaging? Yes. And I think that Al Franken has this joke where he said Democrats' bumper stickers always end with "See next bumper sticker." And I think that clear, simple messaging is going to benefit the Democrats moving forward to a degree that we haven't seen with messaging before. So absolutely looking forward to simplifying our messaging a bit and just focusing on things that I think we can learn from Americans that they are most focused on. We knew that high prices and inflation were major issues, and I think Democrats, myself included, absolutely include myself in this, but were basically casting it off and saying, well, inflation is transitory. And inflation was transitory. But when people are paying higher prices and they can't afford their groceries at the grocery store, us telling people that inflation is transitory is cold comfort. And so I think that this is an opportunity to look at what people are actually saying and to take it seriously, as opposed to just casting it off because we've decided that we know better. They were saying prices were too high. They were saying Joe Biden is too old to run. And I think Democrats largely, again, myself included, ignored all of this because we just decided that wasn't the case. And so it is a testament to our need on the left to listen a little bit better and be more responsive to what people are actually saying. See. I hope we don't have a buffer issue. Who do you think will take the helm for the DNC? Is there one candidate you're hopeful for? Actually, I'm looking to I'm actually looking to moderate a debate between all of the candidates. So that's my hope right now. What I would like to see is the DNC take independent media seriously and allow me or some member of independent media to actually moderate one of the DNC sanctioned forums with all the candidates. So that's what I'm hoping to do. Remains to be seen whether we'll get approval or not, but that's kind of one of the projects that I'm working on in the immediate future. And I do hope that we will see the DNC actually take independent media seriously and give me the opportunity to do that. What do I think about Trudeau resigning? I think that actually lends itself to exactly the issue I was talking about just a few moments ago, which is that incumbent parties across the world have been decimated. And I think the only one, if I'm not mistaken, Claudia Sheinbaum in Mexico, but as far as I'm aware, there haven't been any other major governing majorities that have sustained their majorities or even their leaders in this global environment. And so that's a little bit of like, when I say that we don't want to throw the whole thing away or to not overstate, to not think like, okay, the Democratic Party is dead, it's because if this wasn't a global high inflation environment, I don't know that we would be in a situation where Democrats would have lost so resoundingly. And by the way, it wasn't, this is 1.5% in the popular vote, which is a lot for Democrats who are used to even winning the popular vote, even if we don't win the electoral vote. So I don't want to pretend that we didn't lose, because that much was clear. But at the same time, I do think there's something to be said for at least recognizing a little bit of the global environment that we're living in right now, and not just saying that, okay, like the whole party's trash, throw the whole thing away, because we have seen that there is probably a broader reason for Democrats to lose in this election just by virtue of the economic environment. Okay, it looks like we might be starting here in just a moment.
The House come to order. Mr. Speaker and members of Congress, pursuant to the Constitution and laws of the United States, the Senate and House of Representatives are meeting in joint session to verify the certificates and count the votes of the electors of the several states for President and Vice President of the United States. After ascertainment has been had that the certificates are authentic and correct in form, the tellers will count and make a list of the votes cast by the electors of the several states. The tellers on the part of the two houses will take their places at the clerk's desk.
And I know that Republicans are giddy at the prospect.
Without objection, the tellers will dispense with reading formal portions of the certificates. After ascertaining that the certificates are regular in form and authentic, the tellers will announce the votes cast by the electors for each state, beginning with Alabama. Senator Fisher.
So they're going to go through each state, and then we'll see if there's an objection to any of the states as they read them. I think they're going to go in alphabetical order.
The certificate of the electoral vote of the state of Alabama seems to be regular in form and authentic, and it appears therefrom that Donald J. Trump of the state of Florida received 9 votes for president, and J.D. Vance of the state of Ohio received 9 votes for vice president.
All of this, I should remind you, is Democrats affording Republicans the luxury that Republicans refused to afford Democrats 4 years ago.
The state of Alaska seems to be regular in form and authentic, and it appears therefrom that Donald J. Trump of the state of Florida received 3 votes for president, and J.D. Vance of the state of Ohio received 3 votes for vice president.
Madam President, the certificate of the electoral vote of the state of Arizona seems to be regular in form and authentic, and it appears therefrom that Donald J. Trump of the state of Florida received 11 votes for president, and J.D. Vance of the state of Ohio received 11 votes for vice president.
Madam President, the certificate of the electoral vote of the state of Arkansas seems to be regular in form and authentic, and it appears therefrom that Donald J. Trump of the state of Florida received 6 votes for president, and J.D. Vance of the state of Ohio received 6 votes for vice president.
Madam President, the certificate of the electoral vote of the state of California seems to be regular in form and authentic, and it appears therefrom that Kamala D. Harris of the state of California received 54 votes for president, and Tim Walz of the state of Minnesota received 54 votes for vice president.
Madam President, the certificate of the electoral vote of the state of Colorado seems to be regular in form and authentic, and it appears therefrom that Kamala D. Harris of the state of California received 10 votes for president, and Tim Walz of the state of Minnesota received 10 votes for vice president.
Madam President, the certificate of the electoral vote of the state of Connecticut seems to be regular in form and authentic, and it appears therefrom that Kamala D. Harris of the state of California received 7 votes for president, and Tim Walz of the state of Minnesota received 7 votes for vice president.
Madam President, the certificate of the electoral vote of the state of Delaware seems to be regular in form and authentic, and it appears therefrom that Kamala D. Harris of the state of California received 3 votes for president, and Tim Walz of the state of Minnesota received 3 votes for vice president.
Madam President, the certificate of the electoral vote of the District of Columbia seems to be irregular in form and authentic, and it appears therefrom that Kamala D. Harris of the state of California received 3 votes for president, and Tim Walz of the state of Minnesota received 3 votes for vice president.
Madam President, the certificate of the electoral vote of the state of Florida seems to be regular in form and authentic, and it appears therefrom that Donald J. Trump of the state of Florida received 30 votes for president, and J.D. Vance of the state of Ohio received 30 votes for vice president.
Madam President, the certificate of the electoral vote of the state of Georgia seems to be regular in form and authentic, and it appears therefrom that Donald J. Trump of the state of Florida received 16 votes for president, and J.D. Vance of the state of Ohio received 16 votes for vice president.
Madam President, the certificate of the electoral vote of the state of Hawaii seems to be regular in form and authentic, and it appears therefrom that Kamala D. Harris of the state of California received 4 votes for president, and Tim Walz of the state of Minnesota received 4 votes for vice president.
Madam President, the certificate of the electoral vote of the state of Idaho seems to be regular in form and authentic, and it appears therefrom that Donald J. Trump of the state of Florida received 4 votes for president, and J.D. Vance of the state of Ohio received 4 votes for vice president.
Madam President, the certificate of the electoral vote of the state of Illinois seems to be regular in form and authentic, and it appears therefrom that Kamala D. Harris of the state of California received 19 votes for president, and Tim Walz of the state of Minnesota received 19 votes for vice president.
Madam President, the certificate of the electoral vote of the state of Indiana seems to be regular in form and authentic, and it appears therefrom that Donald J. Trump of the state of Florida received 11 votes for president, and J.D. Vance of the state of Ohio received 11 votes for vice president.
Madam President, the certificate of the electoral vote of the state of Iowa seems to be regular in form and authentic, and it appears therefrom that Donald J. Trump of the state of Florida received 6 votes for president, and J.D. Vance of the state of Ohio received 6 votes for vice president.
Madam President, the certificate of the electoral vote of the state of Kansas seems to be regular in form and authentic, and it appears therefrom that Donald J. Trump of the state of Florida received 6 votes for president, and J.D. Vance of the state of Ohio received 6 votes for vice president.
Madam President, the certificate of the electoral vote of the Commonwealth of Kentucky seems to be regular in form and authentic, and appears therefrom that Donald J. Trump of the state of Florida received 8 votes for president, and J.D. Vance of the state of Ohio received 8 votes for vice president.
Madam President, the certificate of the electoral vote of the state of Louisiana seems to be regular in form and authentic, and it appears therefrom that Donald J. Trump of the state of Florida received 8 votes for president, and J.D. Vance of the state of Ohio received 8 votes for vice president.
Madam President, the certificate of the electoral vote of the state of Maine seems to be regular in form and authentic, and it appears therefrom that Kamala D. Harris of the state of California received 3 votes for president, and Donald J. Trump of the state of Florida received 1 vote for president, and Tim Walz of the state of Minnesota received 3 votes for vice president, and J.D. Vance of the state of Ohio received 1 vote for vice president.
Madam President, the certificate of the electoral vote of the state of Maryland seems to be regular in form and authentic, and it appears therefrom that Kamala D. Harris of the state of California received 10 votes for president, and Tim Walz of the state of Minnesota received 10 votes for vice president.
Madam President, the certificate of the electoral vote of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts seems to be regular in form and authentic, and it appears therefrom that Kamala D. Harris of the state of California received 11 votes for president, and Tim Walz of the state of Minnesota received 11 votes for vice president.
Madam President, the certificate of the electoral vote of the state of Michigan seems to be regular in form and authentic, and it appears therefrom that Donald J. Trump of the state of Florida received 15 votes for president, and J.D. Vance of the state of Ohio received 15 votes for vice president. Madam President, the certificate of the electoral vote of the state of Minnesota seems to be regular in form and authentic, and it appears therefrom that Kamala D. Harris of the state of California received 10 votes for president, and Tim Walz of the state of Minnesota received 10 votes for vice president.
Madam President, the certificate of the electoral vote of the state of Mississippi seems to be regular in form and authentic, and it appears therefrom that Donald J. Trump of the state of Florida received 6 votes for president, and J.D. Vance of the state of Ohio received 6 votes for vice president.
Madam President, the certificate of the electoral vote of the state of Missouri seems to be regular in form and authentic, and it appears therefrom that Donald J. Trump of the state of Florida received 10 votes for president, and J.D. Vance of the state of Ohio received 10 votes for vice president.
Madam President, the certificate of the electoral vote of the state of Montana seems to be regular in form and authentic, and it appears therefrom that Donald J. Trump of the state of Florida received 4 votes for president, and J.D. Vance of the state of Ohio received 4 votes for vice president.
Madam President, the certificate of the electoral vote of the state of Nebraska seems to be regular in form and authentic, and it appears therefrom that Donald J. Trump of the state of Florida received 4 votes for president, and Kamala D. Harris of the state of California received 1 vote for president, and J.D. Vance of the state of Ohio received 4 votes for vice president, and Tim Walz of the state of Minnesota received 1 vote for vice president. Madam President, the certificate of the electoral vote of the state of Nevada seems to be regular in form and authentic, and it appears therefrom that Donald J. Trump of the state of Florida received 6 votes for president, and J.D. Vance of the state of Ohio received 6 votes for vice president.
Madam President, the certificate of the electoral vote of the state of New Hampshire seems to be regular in form and authentic, and it appears therefrom that Kamala D. Harris of the state of California received 4 votes for president, and Tim Walz of the state of Minnesota received 4 votes for vice president.
Madam President, the certificate of the electoral vote of the state of New Jersey seems to be regular in form and authentic, and it appears therefrom that Kamala D. Harris of the state of California received 14 votes for president, and Tim Walz of the state of Minnesota received 14 votes for vice president.
Madam President, the certificate of the electoral vote of the state of New Mexico seems to be regular in form and authentic, and it appears therefrom that Kamala D. Harris of the state of California received 5 votes for president, and Tim Walz of the state of Minnesota received 5 votes for vice president. Madam President, the certificate of the electoral vote of the state of New York seems to be regular in form and authentic, and it appears therefrom that Kamala D. Harris of the state of California received 28 votes for president. Tim Walz of the state of Minnesota received 28 votes for vice president.
Madam President, the certificate of the electoral vote of the state of North Carolina seems to be regular in form and authentic, and it appears therefrom that Donald J. Trump of the state of Florida received 16 votes for president, and J.D. Vance of the state of Ohio received 16 votes for vice president.
Madam President, the certificate of the electoral vote of the state of North Dakota seems to be regular in form and authentic, and it appears therefrom that Donald J. Trump of the state of Florida received 3 votes for president, and J.D. Vance of the state of Ohio received 3 votes for vice president.
Madam President, the certificate of the electoral vote of the state of Ohio seems to be regular in form and authentic, and it appears therefrom that Donald J. Trump of the state of Florida received 17 votes for president, and J.D. Vance of the state of Ohio received 17 votes for vice president.
Madam President, the certificate of the electoral vote of the state of Oklahoma seems to be regular in form and authentic, and it appears therefrom that Donald J. Trump of the state of Florida received 7 votes for president, and J.D. Vance of the state of Ohio received 7 votes for vice president.
Madam President, the certificate of the electoral vote of the state of Oregon seems to be regular in form and authentic, and it appears therefrom that Kamala D. Harris of the state of California received 8 votes for president, and Tim Walz of the state of Minnesota received 8 votes for vice president.
Madam President, the certificate of the electoral vote of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania seems to be regular in form and authentic, and it appears therefrom that Donald J. Trump of the state of Florida received 19 votes for president, and J.D. Vance of the state of Ohio received 19 votes for vice president.
Madam President, the certificate of the electoral vote of the state of Rhode Island seems to be regular in form and authentic, and it appears therefrom that Kamala D. Harris of the state of California received 4 votes for president, and Tim Walz of the state of Minnesota received 4 votes for vice president.
Madam President, the certificate of the electoral vote of the state of South Carolina seems to be regular in form and authentic, and it appears therefrom that Donald J. Trump of the state of Florida received 9 votes for president, and J.D. Vance of the state of Ohio received 9 votes for vice president.
Madam President, the certificate of the electoral vote of the state of South Dakota seems to be regular in form and authentic, and it appears therefrom that Donald J. Trump of the state of Florida received 3 votes for president, and J.D. Vance of the state of Ohio received 3 votes for vice president.
Madam President, the certificate of the electoral vote of the state of Tennessee seems to be regular in form and authentic, and it appears therefrom that Donald J. Trump of the state of Florida received 11 votes for president, and J.D. Vance of the state of Ohio received 11 votes for vice president.
Madam President, the certificate of the electoral vote of the state of Texas seems to be regular in form and authentic, and it appears therefrom that Donald J. Trump of the state of Florida received 40 votes for president, and J.D. Vance of the state of Ohio received 40 votes for vice president.
Madam President, the certificate of the electoral vote of the state of Utah seems to be regular in form and authentic, and it appears therefrom that Donald J. Trump of the state of Florida received 6 votes for president, and J.D. Vance from the state of Ohio received 6 votes for vice president.
Madam President, the certificate of the electoral vote of the state of Vermont seems to be regular in form and authentic, and it appears therefrom that Kamala D. Harris of the state of California received 3 votes for president, and Tim Walz of the state of Minnesota received 3 votes for vice president.
Madam President, the certificate of the electoral vote of the Commonwealth of Virginia seems to be regular in form and authentic, and it appears therefrom that Kamala D. Harris of the state of California received 13 votes for president, and Tim Walz of the state of Minnesota received 13 votes for vice president.
Madam President, the certificate of the electoral vote of the state of Washington seems to be regular in form and authentic, and it appears therefrom that Kamala D. Harris of the state of California received 12 votes for president, and Tim Walz of the state of Minnesota received 12 votes for vice president.
Madam President, the certificate of the electoral vote of the state of West Virginia seems to be regular in form and authentic, and it appears therefrom that Donald J. Trump of the state of Florida received 4 votes for president, and J.D. Vance of the state of Ohio received 4 votes for vice president.
Madam President, the certificate of the electoral vote of the great state of Wisconsin seems to be regular in form and authentic, and it appears therefrom that Donald J. Trump of the state of Florida received 10 votes for president, and J.D. Vance of the state of Ohio received 10 votes for vice president.
Madam President, the certificate of the electoral vote of the state of Wyoming seems to be regular in form and authentic, and it appears therefrom that Donald J. Trump of the state of Florida received 3 votes for president, and J.D. Vance of the state of Ohio received 3 votes for vice president.
Members of Congress, the certificates having been read, the tellers will ascertain and deliver the result to the President of the Senate.
The undersigned, Deb Fisher and Amy Klobuchar, tellers on the part of the Senate, and Brian Steele and Joseph Morelli, tellers on the part of the House of Representatives, report the following as the result of the ascertainment and counting of the electoral vote for President and Vice President of the United States for the term beginning on the 20th day of January, 2025.
The state of the vote for the President of the United States, as delivered to the President of the Senate, is as follows. The whole number of the electors appointed to vote for President of the United States is 538. Within that whole number, the majority is 270. The votes for President of the United States are as follows. Donald J. Trump of the state of Florida has received 312 votes. Kamala D. Harris Kamala D. Harris of the state of California has received 226 votes. The whole number of electors appointed to vote for Vice President of the United States is 538. Within that whole number, a majority is 270. The votes for Vice President of the United States are as follows. J.D. Vance of the state of Ohio has received 312 votes. Tim Walz of the state of Minnesota has received 226 votes. This announcement of the state of the vote by the President of the Senate shall be deemed a sufficient declaration of the persons elected, President and Vice President of the United States, each for a term beginning on the 20th day of January 2025, and shall be entered together with the list of the votes on the journals of the House and the Senate. Thank you very much. Of the joint Senate having been concluded pursuant to Senate Concurrent Resolution Number 2, the 119th Congress, the chair declares this joint session dissolved. Thank you.
So that's it. That was the congressional electoral vote certification. As you noticed, there were 0 objections. No Democrat came forward and objected to the results. To the electoral vote certification. That was probably for 2 reasons. The first being that there was likely no end goal in sight that they would have been able to accomplish by virtue of doing it, and so they figured there was really no pragmatic reason to go ahead and do it. And the second is that it would ultimately not have the optics of doing anything remotely similar to what Republicans did 4 years ago was enough to push them away from objecting for fear of being labeled the exact same election denier that the Republicans, that Democrats called the Republicans for the last 4 years. And I think for the second one, had there been any legitimate prospect or hope that Donald Trump wouldn't have been able to take the oath of office in 2 weeks from now, I think that would have been a different story. But knowing full well that the Supreme Court was not going to side with Democrats or in any way against Donald Trump, and knowing there was no appetite among the Republicans to even abide by the very things that they were saying 4 years ago to this day about Donald Trump being disqualified, they probably viewed this as a fool's errand to even begin the process of looking in any way like the Republicans looked 4 years ago. And so, in effect, what just happened is that Democrats afforded Republicans exactly the thing that they refused to afford them 4 years ago. And look, this is the asymmetry of the two parties at play right here. It is that one party believes in democracy at all costs, the other believes in it only when they win, and we're seeing the latter be put forward right now. Was it a mistake for Democrats to do this? I think at the end of the day, even if Democrats had lodged objections, they wouldn't have been able to reach the threshold that they would need to overturn any of the states. And the reality is that the final arbiter of this question would have been the U.S. Supreme Court, and they've already ruled on this issue of Donald Trump being disqualified from office based on Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, and it was in Trump's favor. And so I think what the Democrats were looking to do was just to figure out which hills to die on, which battles to pick, and this wasn't one that they were willing to fight, knowing probably rightly that there would be no way for them to win this fight in the end. I know that a lot of people, I'm reading the comments right now. I know that a lot of people are upset with this. I am too. Obviously, this is. If you look at the Constitution, it is in clear violation of Section 3 of the 14th Amendment that says that somebody who previously held office cannot, who's engaged in or given aid or comfort to those who've engaged in insurrection, cannot take the oath of office again. Trump will be able to do that. But I've said before on this channel that our laws are really only as strong as everybody's collective desire to uphold them. And right now we only have about half of the government willing to uphold them. And they are more intent on cherry picking the laws that benefit them. And in this instance, you have an entire Republican Party, very much unlike what they themselves were saying 4 years ago today. You have a Republican Party that isn't willing to stand up in the slightest to Donald Trump. You have somebody like Mitch McConnell, who had the opportunity 4 years ago, while he was railing against Donald Trump for inciting the events of January 6th, who refused to whip votes among his Republican conference in the Senate to vote against him in the impeachment trial. And so I think, Democrats just saw the writing on the wall this time and recognized that the final arbiters of this question have already ruled. And is it a sad state of affairs as far as the country is concerned? Yeah. Does it really put on full display the extent to which there really is no adherence to the Constitution? Yes. At the same time, I think that the reality is that we are dealing with a Republican Party that views their sole goal as winning at all costs. And if that means that they are going to collectively agree to ignore the plain text of the Constitution in deference to Trump, then that's exactly what they're going to do. And sadly, there is not enough Democrats to be able to overcome them, and there is not enough of an appetite among both Democrats or Republicans to adhere to the Constitution over the demands of Donald Trump. And so that's the situation that we're in right now. And so at this point, I think the most productive use of our time is going to be figuring out how to effectively message, because we have 22 months until midterms. And I should remind everybody who's watching that we were here 8 years ago, and within 2 years, Democrats would usher in the biggest House majority in modern American history. And 2 years after that would control the House, the Senate, and the White House. So I know that that's cold comfort right now for people watching this, and to overcome the exhaustion that you feel, and probably the complete disillusionment that you have in our government is completely understandable, and I get it. But the reality is that that's the situation that we're in right now. And so I think our time is best spent figuring out how to effectively move forward, how to message effectively, how to build back up our coalition, and to match what we did in 2018, or in the lead up to 2018, where again, we would eventually take the House by the biggest margin in modern American history. And that would serve as a precursor to what we would ultimately see Democrats do in 2020, which is take back the Senate and the White House, as well as retain our grip on the House. And so, again, cold comfort, I understand. I get that a lot of people are disillusioned. I get that a lot of people are upset. I get that a lot of people are yelling about Section 3 of the 14th Amendment and really have no faith in the government as it stands today. I completely understand. So we can do two things. We can, continue to voice our discontent about that, or we can kind of get up, dust ourselves off, and figure out how we are going to most effectively fight moving forward. I'll be here for the fight moving forward. Again, like this is, I know that for a lot of people, this is going to look like some type of capitulation. I get it. Like, I've dedicated my entire life to working in politics and to trying to get Democrats elected so that we can try to enact as much of our agenda as is humanly possible. If there is anybody that understands all of this, it's me. But at the same time, I also do want to try to be a pragmatist. I also do want to make sure that I'm not steering anybody in a direction that I think is going to be a dead end at the end of the day, and figure out how to most effectively use our time and not send us on some quest that I know is going to be a losing one. And again, that is not to say that I don't understand the plain text of the Constitution. It's not to say that I don't understand what Section 3 of the 14th Amendment says. It's not to say that I don't understand that all of these people should have objected to this based on Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. I get it, But at the same time, I think that we have to be pragmatic and figure out the best use of our time moving forward, recognizing the reality that we're facing, as unfortunate as that reality may be, and as disillusioned as we may feel with the entire process. So with all that said, I get it, I understand, and we'll figure out what we can do moving forward. We already have fights on our plate as far as the cabinet nominations are concerned. This is going to be a good test in Democrats figuring out how to message effectively and recognize the fights in front of us and concentrate our fights in terms of what is going to be most effective. There are people like Kash Patel who are up for nomination, people like Pam Bondi who are up for nomination, people like Tulsi Gabbard, like RFK Jr., and then there's other folks who would normally be a huge fight, but I think that this is a good test in Democrats knowing where to expend their political capital and where Democrats should keep their powder dry so as not to make it feel like everything is a five-alarm fire, and in turn, then nothing becomes a five-alarm fire. So that's what we're facing right now. Again, for everybody who is voicing their discontent, I'm reading the comments. I understand. I get that people are disillusioned. I get that people are upset, and this is a dark day in American history where there was a capitulation to Trump in deference to him over the Constitution. I understand. Given that unfortunate reality that we find ourselves in, I think that our best bet right now is to figure out what fights are ahead of us that we need to fight moving forward, and to organize, to make sure that our messaging is coordinated, and to take those fights head on. So that's what I'll do moving forward right now. Again, I appreciate you watching. I appreciate the the passion that people are showing. I agree with you, and that's the reality of where we're at right now.
Michigan seek recognition.
Mr. Speaker, by the direction of the House Republican Conference, I send to the desk a privileged resolution and ask for its immediate consideration.
The clerk will report the resolution.
House Resolution 13, resolved that the following...
I ask unanimous consent to dispense with the reading.
Without objection, the resolution is agreed to, and the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. What purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, by direction of the Democratic Caucus, I offer a privileged resolution and ask for its immediate consideration.
The clerk will report the resolution.
House Resolution 14, resolved that the
Mr.
following...
Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that the resolution be considered as read.
Without objection, the resolution is agreed to, and the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Michigan seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that when the House adjourns today, it stands adjourned until 11 a.m. tomorrow, January 7th.
For what purpose does the gentlelady from Michigan seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House do now adjourn.
The question is on the motion to adjourn. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The motion is agreed to. According to the House, the stands adjourned until 11 a.m. on Tuesday, January 7th, 2025.
Okay, so that is the end of this this congressional vote certification. I think what we're going to do now is I can answer a couple questions here if anybody has them, if you want to throw them in the chat. But otherwise, I have spoken about more broadly kind of my thoughts on this day as a whole. I do think that this was Democrats perhaps naively affording Republicans the exact thing that they refused to afford the Democrats just 4 years ago today. I know that a lot of people are viewing this as a capitulation, are viewing this as Democrats wrongly doing that, are viewing this as Democrats unconstitutionally or illegally doing that. The reality of the situation is that this question, the final arbiter of this question of Trump being disqualified for office, is a question that would ultimately be resolved by the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court's already looked at this question as it relates to Colorado keeping Trump off the primary ballot. They ruled that he could be on the primary ballot, and so they are the final arbiter of this question. They're the final adjudicator of this issue. They've spoken on this issue. If Democrats did object, it would have been appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court. Again, final arbiter of this issue. And so we could have brought this fight, this losing fight, to the U.S. Supreme Court, or we can recognize that politics is a game of winning. And if we want to win moving forward and make our case to the American people, that it's not going to be by virtue of the fact that we're going to prevent Trump from taking office on January 20th after this election. That is not the fight that's going to curry favor with Americans. And I think that for as many people as view that as a capitulation, I get it. For people who view that as illegal, I get it. But that's the reality of the situation that we're in right now. That's the reality of the Supreme Court that we have right now. Look, nobody understands this, again, more than me. I have dedicated my 7 days a week, 14 hours a day to this exact issue and to making sure that Trump would lose this election. So I completely understand. I completely understand the argument that those who have voted to certify the election results, the electoral votes, were violating their oath of office. The reality is, again, that because the Supreme Court weighed in, they're the final adjudicator of this issue, and we know how they would rule. We know how they ruled in the aftermath of the Colorado Supreme Court case, saying the exact same thing. So, in terms of what is going to be most useful moving forward, I think that the reality is that if we want to win elections moving forward, it will be more beneficial to us to make the case to the American people, hold Republicans to account, than it is to relitigate the events of, or relitigate Trump's electoral certification right now. I think that that's not going to be a winning argument to Americans if we engage in the same thing that Republicans engaged in for the last 4 years. And so make our case to the American people, win. Remember, Republicans made a lot of promises over the last year or so about how they're going to bring housing prices down, how they're going to bring rent prices down, how they're going to bring food prices down, how they're purportedly going to protect earned benefits. So we get to hold them to account for all of that. They have unified control of government, House, Senate, White House. There is no Democrats to blame if anything goes wrong. So you can take it to the bank that we will be looking at the prices of everything that Republicans promised to fix and see if they actually make good on it. And that'll be our job in making sure that the American people more broadly understand whether or not they're able to hold true to their promises as we approach midterms in 2026. But again, just a reminder that we have been here before. We have watched Donald Trump take the oath of office on January 20th or 21st before. It happened in 2017. Within 2 years of that, Democrats would retake the majority in the House by the biggest margin in modern American history, and that would eventually give way to unified control of government by the Democrats. I think that one thing that people more broadly are not giving enough credence to is the fact that with Trump comes chaos. And the American people don't, American people are not looking to embrace chaos. That isn't something they're looking to reward. And in the same way that they voted him out in 2020, we will see Republicans face, I believe, a similar fate as we head toward the next general election. But our first goal right now is just to look ahead toward midterms, figure out what battles we can fight, and figure out how to most effectively fight them. So that's where we are right now. I see people in the comments saying, can he be impeached? Metaphysically, anything is possible. Will he be impeached right now? No, it's just not going to happen right now. And so I think really we have to just wait and see what happens. If he does something that's worthy of impeachment, then obviously the option is available. But I think it's probably a fool's errand to say impeach him now. It's just not going to happen. And our goal has to be persuasion. Our goal has to be looking forward to making our case to the American people, because the reality is that Donald Trump won the popular vote in this election cycle. And so we have work to do in terms of building up our coalition. And we have to figure out with every day as an opportunity to figure out how to grab people back, figuring out what the most effective way to do that is. Is it going to be launching into an impeachment on day one? No. The reality is that that's not going to be the way to expand our coalition. Every day is a messaging opportunity. Every day is a persuasion opportunity. We inherently have to expand our coalition. We have to broaden our tent if we want to win moving forward. So every day has to be an opportunity to figure out, is what we are going to do, is what we're going to say, an effective way to bring these people back into the fold. People who have become disaffected with the Democratic Party, people who have become disaffected with politics more broadly, people who might have voted for Joe Biden and then switched over to Trump between 2020 and 2024. Every day, before we do and say anything, we have to ask ourselves, is this the best way to grab those people back? Is this the best way to persuade those people to vote for Democrats again? And so it's going to be a lot of thinking about what fights we wage and what battles we engage in. Some of them that means that some fights, although virtuous, are going to have to be left on the cutting room floor, but we'll figure that out kind of as we move forward. And I know that what I'm saying is not going to be satisfactory to a lot of people who are listening. I understand that, and but the sad truth, I think, right now is that there is a difference between what is completely right and what is realistic or pragmatic or in front of us right now. And sadly, there is a pretty vast gap between those two things. But that's the reality of politics. It's not always going to be fair, as we've learned pretty abundantly in the last few years. But remember, too, there is a big coalition of people in this country who I think are going to, who are still on our side. We are not completely out in the wilderness, and we'll have some time pretty quickly with a party of arsonists in full control of government, who are already proving, even with a less than ideal speaker vote, that they're not especially capable of governing, and they have to figure out how to do it with a one-seat majority. So we'll see what happens in the coming days, but we'll figure out how to message effectively, how to resist effectively, where it seems appropriate, and we'll take it from there. But all eyes right now on just figuring out how to cobble back together a coalition and win moving forward. So that's going to be my goal as we head toward, into the Trump administration here. But I'll be with you and trying to do my best at figuring out how to message effectively every day as we move forward in this process. So I appreciate you tuning in. I would beg of you that, even though this is a dark day in American history, to not check out, to take time you need, but to not check out, because if anything is a capitulation to Republicans, it is people losing faith in the democratic process. That is what Republicans are looking for. And so I would just request that you not reward these people who are doing the most to hurt you by giving them exactly what they want. That's what I would offer up here. So we will leave it there. If you want to support this channel, keep on top of independent progressive media, please make sure to follow or subscribe. That's the best way to support what I do. I won't put my content behind a paywall. I don't believe in that, but simply subscribing or following is the best way to support what I do. And we'll leave it there. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in, and as soon as we have any other updates, I'll bring them to you. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.